Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale, where stories comes alive. Please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. The sun was setting over the red-brown earth of Rosefield, a small town that smelled of roasted corn, dust, and dreams that rarely came true. Grace Parker walked barefoot along the narrow path that led from the market to her family's little house. She carried a basket of vegetables on her head and a smile on her lips, the kind of smile that refused to die no matter how hard life pressed her. Grace was the second of 4 children, daughter of a sickly mother and a father who had long given up on finding decent work. She was the strong one, the dreamer, the one who believed that tomorrow could be brighter than today. But what truly made her days glow was Daniel Brooks. Daniel was the kind of young man people described with a mixture of envy and admiration. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried fire and hunger, he was not content with the dusty lanes of Rosefield. He wanted more than the crumbling school building, more than the endless fields, more than the poor boy label life had given him. That evening, Daniel waited for her at the big mango tree near the stream. It was their secret place, where they talked about the future, about love, about everything they couldn't say aloud at home. "Grace," he called when he saw her coming. She smiled, her heart fluttering. "You came early today." "I couldn't wait," he said, taking the basket from her head and setting it down gently. "You know I hate when you carry heavy things." Grace laughed softly. "And you know I hate when you worry too much. I've been carrying baskets since I was 10. Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he took her hand, rough but warm, and looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart beat faster. "Grace," he said, "one day, I'll give you a life where you'll never carry a basket again." Her eyes softened. "And what if I don't mind carrying baskets, as long as I carry them with you?" For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Daniel bent down, his forehead resting lightly on hers. "I love you, Grace Parker," he whispered. "And I love you, Daniel Brooks," she replied, her voice steady, her heart full. They stayed that way, 2 young souls in love, wrapped in promises that felt stronger than the dust of poverty around them. Later that night, Grace lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. She replayed his words over and over, the promise of a future where love was enough. In her chest, hope grew like a flame. The following week, they met again after the Saturday market. Grace had spent the day selling her mother's homemade soap, while Daniel helped his uncle push a cart of firewood. As they sat under the mango tree, Grace spoke first. "I was thinking, when we get married, maybe we could build a small house here, near the stream. It will be quiet. I'll plant flowers." Daniel smiled, but his smile was heavy. "And how will we build the house, Grace? With what money?" She looked at him carefully. "We'll work hard. I'll sell soap, you'll find a job, even if it's little, we'll manage." But Daniel shook his head. "I don't want to manage, Grace. I don't want you washing clothes for rich people while I break my back for pennies. I want more. I need more." Grace reached for his hand, squeezing it. "More will come. We're still young." His jaw tightened. "I don't want to wait. I want to taste what it feels like to be respected, to wear good suits, to sit at the table where decisions are made. I'm tired of looking up at rich men as if they are gods." Grace's heart ached. She knew his hunger for success was bigger than hers. She only wanted love, stability, family. He wanted the world. "Still," she whispered, "as long as you don't leave me behind, Daniel." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and kissed her forehead. "Never. You are my world, Grace. My forever." It happened sooner than anyone expected. Daniel had been helping his uncle with deliveries when he met Richard Miller, the wealthy factory owner in Rosefield. Richard's family was one of the richest in the region, and his only daughter, Victoria Miller, had just returned from studying abroad. Beautiful, polished, and proud, Victoria was everything Daniel thought belonged to another world, a world he secretly longed for. One evening, Daniel was invited to deliver firewood to the Miller's estate. It was there he first spoke with Victoria. She laughed at his boldness, intrigued by the poor but confident young man who wasn't afraid to look her in the eye. From that day, Daniel began to change. Grace noticed it first in the way he spoke. The softness in his tone was replaced by impatience, the long walks under the moonlight grew fewer, and the promises they once whispered were slowly drowned by silence. One evening, she finally asked. "Daniel," she said, as they sat by the stream, "you've been distant. Is something wrong?" He avoided her gaze. "Grace, life is moving fast. Opportunities are opening up." "What kind of opportunities?" she pressed. He sighed. "Mr. Miller, he sees potential in me. He said he could help me if I make the right decisions." Grace frowned. "What kind of decisions?" Daniel's voice dropped. "Victoria." Grace's chest tightened. "What about her?" "She likes me. And her father approves. If I marry her, Grace, everything changes. I'll be in a position to rise. I'll never have to struggle again. We'll never have to struggle again." Grace stared at him, disbelief flooding her. "Daniel, you're joking, right?" He shook his head. "Grace, think about it. This is bigger than love. This is destiny." Her voice broke. "What about our destiny? The house by the stream? The flowers? The promises?" Daniel's face hardened. "Promises don't feed families, Grace. Love doesn't buy respect. I'm tired of living small." Tears filled her eyes. "So you'll throw me away? After everything we've been through? After everything you said?" Daniel stood, frustration burning in him. "Don't make this harder than it is. You're a good woman, Grace. But I need more. And Victoria, she is the key." Her tears fell freely now, staining her cheeks. "You're choosing her over me, because of money?" His voice was flat. "Because of the future." Grace rose to her feet, her hands trembling. "Then may your future never know peace. Because you've traded love for gold, and gold will never hold you when you're broken." Daniel flinched, but he didn't stop her as she picked up her basket and walked away into the night, her sobs swallowed by the darkness. Grace left Rosefield the following week. With what little money she had, she boarded a rusty bus to the city. She didn't know where she was going or how she would survive, but she knew she could not stay. Everywhere she turned, she saw him, Daniel Brooks, the man who had promised forever but chosen status instead. As the bus rolled away, Grace pressed her face against the window, whispering to herself, "I will never let anyone humiliate me again. One day, I'll return, not as the girl who was left behind, but as a woman no one can throw away." And somewhere in the Grand Miller estate, Daniel put on a new suit, ready to step into a world of wealth and power, never knowing that the love he had abandoned would one day return to shake the very ground he stood on. The city was not kind to Grace Parker at first. The bus had left her with only a small bag, a few clothes, and less than $50 in her pocket. She had no relatives here, no friends, and no one waiting to welcome her. But she carried something stronger than money, pain that pushed her forward and determination that refused to die. The first few nights, she stayed in a small, crowded hostel for women, where the smell of kerosene lamps mixed with the cries of babies and the whispers of broken hearts. Many of the women there had stories of betrayal, poverty, and disappointment. Grace listened silently, her own story too raw to share. One evening, as she sat outside on a broken wooden bench, staring at the city lights, an older woman named Mrs. White noticed her. "You've been quiet since you came," Mrs. White said. "What are you running from, child?" Grace forced a smile. "Not running. Just starting over." Mrs. White studied her. "You look like a girl who has fire inside. Don't waste it crying. Use it." Those words sank deep into Grace's heart. She decided she would not be defined by what Daniel did to her. The next morning, Grace walked to a local cafe and asked for work. The manager, a young man named Philip, looked doubtful at first. "Do you have experience?" he asked. "No," Grace admitted, "but I can learn. I work hard. I'll come early, leave late. Just give me a chance." Something in her eyes convinced him. "All right. You'll clean tables and wash dishes. Pay isn't much." Grace smiled. "I'll take it." For months, she scrubbed plates, wiped tables, and carried trays. Her hands were raw, her body tired, but her spirit grew stronger. Every night, she set aside a little of her wages. Slowly, She saved enough to pay for evening classes. She enrolled in a business management course at a community center. Many nights, she studied until her eyes ached, but she refused to stop. Her classmates admired her. "You're always so focused, Grace," one of them said. She replied softly, "I've already lost too much to give up now." After 2 years of sacrifice, Grace graduated at the top of her class. Her instructors praised her intelligence and discipline. One of them, Mrs. Carter, pulled her aside. "Grace, you have a rare mind," Mrs. Carter said. "Don't waste it working tables. Start something. Build something." Grace hesitated. "But I have no capital." Mrs. Carter smiled. "Sometimes capital is not money. It is trust. And I trust you." True to her word, Mrs. Carter introduced Grace to a small group of women looking for affordable skincare products. Grace remembered her mother's soap-making skills back in Rosefield. Using her savings, she bought raw materials and began making natural soaps in her tiny hostel room. At first, she sold only to neighbors and classmates. Then word spread. Her soaps were gentle, affordable, and smelled of lavender and honey. Demand grew. One evening, Mrs. White, the same woman who had once encouraged her, visited and bought a batch. Holding the soap in her hand, she said with tears, "I told you, child. You have fire." 5 years passed. Grace was no longer the girl who had arrived broken and penniless. She was now the proud owner of Graceful Touch, a thriving skincare brand that had found its way into supermarkets, beauty shops, and even hotels. She dressed with elegance, spoke with confidence, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that turned heads wherever she went. People respected her not only for her success but for her kindness and humility. At conferences, she became a sought-after speaker. "My story began with pain," she often told audiences, "but pain can be the soil where strength grows." Her words inspired many, but deep inside, there was still a scar shaped like Daniel Brooks. Yet, she refused to let it define her. It was the night of the Miller Foundation Charity Gala, the most glamorous event of the year. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, golden drapes, and a sea of powerful men and women in elegant gowns and suits. Grace entered gracefully, her emerald green dress flowing like liquid silk, diamonds glinting on her wrist. She walked with Richard Miller, the billionaire CEO whose empire stretched across industries. His presence was commanding, his smile polished, and his arm wrapped around Grace's waist with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer declared, "please welcome Richard Miller and his wife, Grace Miller." Applause filled the room as cameras flashed. Grace smiled politely, though her heart pounded. She had attended many events before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, fate had prepared a stage. Across the room, Daniel Brooks stood with other senior managers of Miller Enterprises. He wore an expensive suit now, his hair slicked back, his posture proud. But when his eyes fell on Grace, the glass of champagne in his hand nearly slipped. His heart stopped. His breath caught. The girl he had abandoned, the girl whose tears still haunted him in quiet moments, stood before him as the wife of his boss. "Daniel," whispered a colleague, "are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Daniel's voice was hoarse. "Not a ghost. An angel I buried alive." Richard led Grace toward the group of managers. "Gentlemen, meet my wife, Grace." One by one, they greeted her. When her eyes finally locked with Daniel's, time froze. Grace's lips curved into a calm, polite smile. "Good evening, Mr. Brooks." Daniel swallowed hard. "Grace," his voice cracked. "It's been a long time." Richard, unaware of the storm beneath the surface, chuckled. "So you two know each other?" Grace didn't flinch. "Yes. Once upon a time, in another life." Daniel's hands trembled slightly. He forced a smile. "Yes. Another life." But inside, he was crumbling. Later that night, Daniel found a moment to pull Grace aside. They stood near the balcony, the city lights shimmering in the distance. "Grace," he whispered, "I can't believe it's you. After all these years, you're here. You're Mrs. Miller." Grace's eyes were calm, unreadable. "Yes. Life has a strange way of turning tables." He stepped closer. I never stopped thinking about you. She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. You stopped long enough to choose Victoria over me. Daniel winced. I was foolish. Blinded. Grace, Don't, she interrupted sharply. Don't say what you think I want to hear. I didn't survive all these years waiting for your regrets. I built myself. I became who I am without you. His shoulders slumped. You don't know how much I regret. I don't care, she cut in, her eyes flashing. Your regret is your burden. My strength is mine. She turned to leave, but Daniel caught her wrist lightly. Grace, are you happy with him? She paused, then looked him straight in the eyes. Happier than I ever would have been with you. With that, she walked back into the ballroom, her head held high. Daniel stood frozen on the balcony, his chest heavy with the weight of every choice he had ever made. For the first time, he truly understood the cost of chasing status. Inside, Grace returned to Richard's side, her smile flawless, her poise unshaken. But deep inside her, emotions swirled a storm of pain, triumph, and unanswered questions. She whispered to herself, let the games begin. And in that glittering ballroom, under the eyes of the powerful, a new chapter of destiny silently unfolded. The Miller Enterprises boardroom was a glass tower of power. Long polished tables, leather chairs, and walls lined with framed photographs of Richard Miller's achievements. Senior executives sat around the table, papers and laptops spread before them. At the head of the table sat Richard himself, with Grace by his side. Grace wore a white suit that shimmered under the soft lights. She wasn't just a wife in the room, she carried herself like a queen, poised and untouchable. Every word she spoke was measured, her voice calm, her smile professional. Across the table, Daniel Brooks sat stiffly, his pen in his hand but his thoughts scattered. Every time his eyes met hers, he felt his chest tighten. She's different now, he thought. So strong, so untouchable. But I knew her when she laughed with her whole heart. I knew her when she dreamed of flowers by the stream. Grace noticed his gaze but pretended not to. She had mastered the art of indifference. To everyone else, Daniel was just another executive, but to her, he was the ghost of promises broken. After the meeting, as the board members filed out, Daniel lingered. He pretended to shuffle papers, waiting for a chance. Grace stood, gathering her notes, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Grace, Daniel said softly when most people had left. She didn't look up. Mrs. Miller, to you. He flinched. Please, don't be so cold. You know me better than anyone. Finally, she raised her eyes, sharp and calm. Do I? The man I knew would have chosen love. The man I knew would have kept his promises. Tell me, Daniel, do I really know you? His voice broke. I made a mistake. Every day I wake up and regret it. Grace's lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile. Regret doesn't erase betrayal. Regret doesn't heal wounds. It only reminds you of what you lost. She turned to leave, but Daniel stepped closer. Grace, when you sit beside him, do you ever think of us? Do you ever remember? For a moment, her mask slipped. Her eyes softened, pain flickering behind them. But just as quickly, she straightened. No, Daniel, she said firmly. I don't live in the past. You should try it too. And with that, she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving him drowning in the weight of his guilt. Weeks later, at a luxury gathering hosted by international investors, Grace glided through the room in a crimson gown. Richard introduced her proudly, my wife, Grace Miller. Brilliant, isn't she? Daniel watched from across the room, champagne untouched in his hand. Every smile she gave, every graceful nod, every word she spoke, it tore at him. She wears a crown now, he thought, but does anyone know how much she suffered before she put it on? He wanted to speak to her, to explain, to apologize again. But whenever their eyes met, her expression was calm, unreadable, like glass he could never break through. Later that night, Daniel stood alone on the balcony, staring at the city lights. He whispered into the wind, I gave her away, and now she's everything I could have dreamed of. And I'll never have her back. Inside, Grace watched him from a distance. Her heart ached, but she clenched her fists. She couldn't allow herself to fall back into his shadow. She had risen too high to stumble again. From the outside, Richard Miller seemed like the perfect husband. He gave Grace everything: mansions, jewels, vacations, admiration. He spoke of her with pride at every event. To the world, they were the golden couple. But behind closed doors, cracks began to show. It started small. One evening, Grace returned home from a women's empowerment seminar she had been invited to speak at. She entered the grand living room, still glowing from the experience. "Richard," she said with excitement, "the event went so well. So many young women said they were inspired. I want to start a foundation." "Enough," Richard interrupted, lowering his glass of wine. "You don't need to waste time on small people. You're my wife. Your place is here, not running around giving speeches." Grace froze. "But I thought." "You thought wrong," Richard said, his tone sharper now. "I provide for you. That should be enough." Her lips trembled, but she stayed quiet. That night, for the first time, she felt the weight of a cage, golden, polished, but still a cage. Days turned into weeks, and Richard's controlling side grew clearer. He chose what she wore to certain events. He monitored who she spoke to. He dismissed her ideas in meetings, even when others supported them. One evening at dinner, Grace tried again. "Richard, I want to expand graceful touch. We can use the company network." He cut her off, his voice low and firm. "I don't want you mixing your little soap business with my empire. Focus on being Mrs. Miller. That is enough." Grace's heart sank. She had built her business with sweat and tears, yet to him, it was little. She whispered, "Do you even see me, Richard? Or do you only see your possession?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "Watch your words, Grace. Don't forget who put you in this life." She looked away, tears stinging her eyes. She had thought she had escaped poverty into freedom, but instead she had walked into another prison, just gilded and quiet. At a corporate retreat in Cape Town, Grace and Richard attended with other executives, including Daniel. Over dinner, Richard spoke with his usual commanding tone, but Daniel noticed the way Grace's smile didn't reach her eyes. Later, as everyone mingled, Daniel found her standing alone by the terrace, staring at the ocean waves. "Grace," he said gently, "you look tired." She gave a small laugh. "Do I? Maybe it's the makeup hiding it." Daniel studied her carefully. "No one else sees it, but I do. You're not happy, are you?" Grace stiffened. "It's none of your concern." "Maybe not," Daniel admitted, "but I know what it feels like to cage you. I did it once, with my choices. And now I see him doing it too." Her chest tightened. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't speak as if you care." "But I do," Daniel said softly. "More than you think." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "You lost the right to care the day you left me. Don't try to rewrite history now." Yet her voice wavered, betraying the storm inside her. That night, back in their hotel suite, Richard confronted her. "I saw you speaking with Brooks," he said coldly. "Stay away from him." Grace frowned. "We only talked. Nothing more." Richard's eyes hardened. "I don't like the way he looks at you. You're my wife. Remember that." Grace's heart pounded. For the first time, fear mixed with her frustration. She realized that Richard's charm in public was only a mask, and behind it was a man who saw her as property, not a partner. As she lay awake in the silence of the hotel room, she whispered to herself, "Did I escape Daniel's betrayal only to walk into Richard's prison?" Her eyes closed, but her soul refused to sleep. Somewhere deep inside, the fire of the girl who once rose from the ashes began to stir again. Grace sat in her study one quiet evening, flipping through old letters and papers. Richard was away on business, and the mansion felt unusually silent. She found herself pulling out a small wooden box she hadn't opened in years. Inside was a faded hospital wristband, folded documents, and a photograph of her younger self, pale and weak, holding nothing but tears. Her hands trembled. Memories she had buried deep began to rise. The baby. It had been years ago, just after Daniel left her. She had discovered she was carrying his child. For a brief moment, she had believed that child would be her reason to live. But tragedy had struck. Complications ended the pregnancy before the baby could take its first breath. Grace had buried her grief alone, never telling Daniel, never telling anyone except the doctor. As she held the wristband, a knock came at the door. "Mrs. Miller," the maid said softly, "someone is here to see you." "A Dr. Evans." Grace froze. Dr. Evans was the only one who knew her secret. When Dr. Evans entered, his face carried the weight of years. "Grace, I know you asked me never to speak of it again. But Daniel came to me recently, for a checkup. And somehow, the truth slipped out." Grace's heart stopped. "You told him?" Dr. Evans nodded guiltily. "He needed to know." Grace sank into her chair, her eyes wide with shock. After all these years. The next day, Daniel appeared at her office, his face pale, his eyes full of anguish. He closed the door behind him, his hands trembling. "Grace," he said, voice raw, "why didn't you tell me?" She looked away. "There was nothing to tell. It's over." His voice broke. "Don't do that. Don't pretend it didn't happen. You carried my child. Our child. And I never knew." Tears burned her eyes, but she kept her tone steady. "What good would it have done? You had chosen Victoria. You were chasing your future. I was just a chapter you wanted to close." Daniel's chest rose and fell heavily. "Grace, if I had known." She cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare say you would have stayed. Don't lie to make me feel better. You left because you wanted power, not because you didn't know about the baby." He swallowed hard, guilt flooding his face. "Still, I should have been there. I should have." Her voice cracked. "Do you know what it's like to bury a child alone? To cry with no one to hold you? To carry both the betrayal and the loss?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Grace, I failed you. I failed both of you." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Grace whispered, "You lost me once, Daniel. That child was the last piece of us. Now there is nothing left." She turned away, but deep inside, her soul bled again from wounds she thought had healed. Daniel Brooks had always been ambitious, but ambition without patience often breeds destruction. In his hunger to rise higher in Miller Enterprises, he had engaged in shady dealings, cutting corners, bribing suppliers, inflating profits. For months, he thought no one would notice. But in a company built on Richard Miller's ruthless discipline, nothing stayed hidden forever. At a high-stakes board meeting, Richard slammed a folder onto the table. "Daniel Brooks," he said, his voice like thunder, "your numbers don't add up. We've investigated your accounts. Kickbacks. Fraudulent contracts. Lies." The room fell silent. Daniel's face drained of color. "Sir, I can explain." Richard's fist hit the table. "Explain how you tried to steal from me. From my empire. Do you think I built this company by being blind?" Daniel stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "It wasn't like that. I just..." "Enough," Richard barked. "You're finished here. By the time the sun sets, I want your resignation on my desk. If not, I'll see you in court and make sure you never work again." Gasps filled the room. Grace sat frozen, her heart pounding. Daniel glanced at her, desperation in his eyes. For the first time, the proud man who once walked away from her looked small, broken, terrified. That evening, as Grace walked out of the building, Daniel caught up to her. His tie was loose, his face pale, his eyes swollen from silent tears. "Grace, please," he whispered. "Talk to him. You're his wife. He listens to you. Please, don't let him destroy me." She shook her head. "Why should I? You destroyed me once." His voice cracked. "I know. And I'll never forgive myself. But Grace, if Richard ruins me, I'll have nothing left. No job. No reputation. Nothing." Her lips trembled. "And when I had nothing, where were you? When I cried for you, where were you? When I lost our child, where were you?" Daniel dropped to his knees on the marble floor. "I wasn't there. I failed you. I know that. But please, Grace, don't let this be the end of me. I'm begging you." Tears welled in her eyes. The sight of him kneeling, stripped of pride, broke something inside her. "Stand up, Daniel," she said softly. He looked up at her, desperate. "Will you help me?" Her voice was cold, but her heart wavered. "I don't know yet." That night, Grace lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Richard slept soundly beside her, oblivious to the storm raging in her heart. Part of her wanted to let Daniel crumble, to watch him taste the pain of loss the way she once had. But another part of her, the part that still remembered laughter by the stream, the part that still mourned their child, couldn't ignore his plea. She whispered into the darkness, "Why did you come back into my life, Daniel? Why now?" No answer came, only the sound of her own racing heartbeat. Grace found herself outside Richard's study the next morning. She hesitated, then knocked. "Come in," Richard said, looking up from his papers. Grace stepped inside, her face calm. "Richard, about Daniel." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you're defending him. That man is a snake." Grace took a deep breath. "He made mistakes, yes. But destroying him completely, is it necessary?" Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why do you care?" Her heart pounded. She forced herself to stay steady. "Because mercy can be more powerful than punishment. Show him mercy, and he'll never forget it." Richard smirked. "You're too soft, Grace. That's why I love you, but that's also why you don't understand business. Men like Daniel only learn through pain." Grace swallowed, her eyes firm. Sometimes pain isn't the answer. Sometimes, grace is. Richard chuckled at the wordplay, but his eyes were cold. "We'll see." That night, Daniel waited for her call, his soul hanging by a thread. And Grace, standing at the window of her golden cage, realized that her next choice would change not just his future but hers. The morning air was sharp as Grace stepped into Richard's private study. The leather smell of his office and the cold glare of his steel desk matched the hardness in his eyes when he looked up at her. "Again with Daniel?" Richard asked, raising an eyebrow. "Grace, why are you wasting your voice on a man who betrayed you? He's nothing." Grace clasped her hands in front of her, her voice calm but steady. "Richard, listen to me. Destroying him completely won't make you stronger. It'll only prove how afraid you are of him." Richard leaned back, smirking. "Afraid? Don't flatter him. He's a small man who made small mistakes. Men like him deserve to be crushed." Grace met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe. But I'm not asking for mercy because of who he is. I'm asking because of who I am. I won't stand by and watch another life burn, not even his. Not anymore." For a long moment, Richard studied her. Then he laughed softly. "You've changed, Grace. You've grown sharp edges. I almost like it." Grace didn't smile. "This isn't about what you like. It's about respect. And you will respect my decision." Richard's smirk faded. For once, he saw not just a graceful wife, but a woman who carried quiet power in her voice. Later that day, Grace called Daniel to a quiet garden behind the Miller mansion. He arrived looking hollow, his pride stripped away. "Grace," he said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." She stood tall, her green silk dress swaying gently in the breeze. "I didn't come for you. I came for myself." His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" She took a slow breath. "I spoke to Richard. He'll let you go quietly. No lawsuits. No jail. You'll keep your name, but nothing else." Daniel blinked, shocked. You did that for me." Her eyes hardened. "Don't mistake this for love, Daniel. This is closure. You once chose status over me. And now, I choose power over you. You will walk away alive, but with nothing, just as I once did because of you." Daniel's voice cracked. "Grace, I don't deserve this kindness." She cut him off sharply. "You're right. You don't. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it so I can finally let go." Silence stretched between them. The weight of her words sank into him like stones. Finally, Daniel whispered, "You're stronger than I ever was. Stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Grace's lips trembled, but she steadied herself. "And you're weaker than I thought. Live with that, Daniel. live with the memory of the woman you left behind because she's the one standing in front of you now. She turned to leave, her heels crunching against the gravel path. Daniel stood rooted, his chest aching with regret. He had dreamed of power, of being respected. Yet the one person who once loved him unconditionally now commanded him with a voice sharper than any blade. Weeks passed. The scandal around Daniel's downfall faded into whispers, and the city moved on. But for Daniel, life had turned grey. His resignation was final, his reputation bruised. He walked the streets like a man stripped of his crown, a ghost of the ambitious boy who once dreamed of empires. Meanwhile, Grace blossomed. Though still Richard's wife, she carved her own space in the empire. People admired her sharp mind and gentle strength, often whispering that she was the true heart of the company. One afternoon, Grace was leaving a charity event when she spotted Daniel waiting near the steps. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow, but he still managed a broken smile. "Grace," he said quietly, "may I walk with you?" She hesitated, then nodded. They walked slowly down the garden path, silence hanging between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I wanted to thank you for saving me, even when I didn't deserve it." Grace glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You don't owe me thanks. You owe me acknowledgement. That I was never the problem. That I was always enough." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "You were more than enough. I was the fool. I thought power would fill the emptiness inside me. But now I see, it only left me hollow." Grace stopped walking. She faced him fully, her voice steady. "You once told me I wasn't enough for the life you wanted. But look at us now. You're standing with regret. I'm standing with purpose. Do you see the difference?" He bowed his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I see it. And it will haunt me forever." As Daniel walked away, shoulders bent under the weight of his choices, Grace felt a strange calm settle inside her. 4 years, she had carried the ache of his betrayal, the sorrow of their lost child, the bitterness of being cast aside. But now, watching him fade into the distance, she realized something powerful. Her worth had never been tied to him, or to Richard, or to any man. Her worth was her own. That night, standing by her window, Grace whispered to herself, "I am enough. I always was." The city lights glowed below, and for the first time in years, Grace felt free. In the months that followed, Daniel tried to rebuild his life. He found smaller jobs, lived modestly, but everywhere he went, whispers followed, the man who betrayed love for power, only to lose both. He carried Grace's words with him like a scar. And though he lived, he would never escape the shadow of the choice that ruined him. At a company gala months later, Grace stood before a crowd, delivering a speech on resilience and self-worth. Her voice was clear, her poise unshakable. "Life will test you," she said, her eyes sweeping over the audience. "People will betray you. They will try to define you. But the truth is simple, your worth is never in their hands. It is in yours. And once you see that, no one can take it away." Applause thundered through the hall. Richard smiled proudly, but Grace wasn't speaking for him. She wasn't even speaking for Daniel, who stood quietly at the back of the crowd, unseen by most. She was speaking for herself. And in that moment, Grace Parker Miller was no longer just a wife, or a woman once betrayed. She was the woman who rose, the woman who reclaimed her voice, the woman who chose herself. Daniel lowered his head, clapping softly with trembling hands. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered to himself, "She won." And she had. Please don't forget to hit the like button, comment and subscribe, it really means a lot to us. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to get more interesting stories like this.